Hello everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. First things first, not much eye makeup today. I'm doing a little bit of a wear test off this pencil and I don't really want to interrupt it with anything else. We're going to talk about Pat McGrath Labs today. I've had a few opinions about the brand over time, and especially when we're looking at new releases and things like that. It's a brand that I had tired of quite quickly because of the, I guess, lack of attention the brand seemed to be getting, not from customers, not from the public, but from the brand itself. It almost felt like they were just getting by. For those who don't know, Pat McGrath has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were up for sale, now they're not, and we'll go over all that as well. Let me just powder my face here. One thing I do want to say getting into this though is Pat McGrath herself, the makeup artist, is an incredible, iconic, never does anything wrong makeup artist, right? Full respect from me forever. Incredible artist. So much so that I got kind of angry when she was announced as a creative director of the new Louis Vuitton brand. People were saying it was Louis Vuitton x Pat McGrath, like she was some kind of influencer. And I was like, no, she is creative director. This isn't just her name on it, it's just chosen a few shades. She is coming up with formulas. She is creating this brand, as she has done with so many other brands in the past. You probably have products that you use that she has made, you know what I mean? So what we're not ever gonna do is disrespect her in any way. She is incredible. She is incredible. Her brand, however, we can separate from her a little bit, as I kind of feel like it had separated from her a little bit, but again, we'll get into that. So that's on that. So as I mentioned, Pat McGrath Labs, the brand, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And a lot of people are confused kind of at where it's come from. I'm kind of not. And what that means for the brand going forward, you know, what's going to happen next. So I thought I would make this video just to get everyone up to speed on what's happening, what bankruptcy means for a brand, for a makeup brand. I also want to know before we get into this, whether or not you're a fan of a brand, did you see this coming? I would love to know. Do you remember your first feelings towards this brand when you first saw it come out? For any of you who don't really know the brand that well, it was launched in 2015. Pat said herself that this was setting out to be imperfect deliberately, with her having the ability to bring out a product basically whenever, using it mainly as a passion project, which sounds like a true artist, you know what I mean? I was gonna release stuff whenever. A really good example of this setup and what actually started Pat McGrath Labs was the Gold 001, which was a $40 yellow gold intense foily pigment that Pat had found while she was working in a cosmetic lab for brands like Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble looked after brands like CoverGirl and Max Factor. She had apparently wanted to release the pigment as quickly as possible because she loved the finish and wanted other artists to have it. So she skipped out on things like packaging, packaging design, and basically all the housework that takes ages when you start up a brand. I never actually got this product, but I really liked the idea. I thought it was really cool and I thought it was very artistic, because who needs gold foil? You know what I mean? Who needs a gold foil pigment all the time? I did think the packaging was a bit off. You know, this was Pat McGrath. I thought maybe there'll be a lot of investors who would want to get the packaging up, because it was this pouch with sequins in it, just loads of sequins in it, and the product inside. So it did look a bit indie brand, which I guess it was at the time. So it did give a bit like Etsy, you know what I mean? But it makes sense now, the casualness of it, just releasing things when she wanted to, in her own time. It makes perfect sense, because what else are you gonna do? Design a whole package, you know? And listen, I would die for something to be like that released now. Now we're in like clean girl era. So yeah, Gold 001 was this new, exciting, professional grade formula that had just been released by an iconic working makeup artist, Pat McGrath herself, Dame. Everyone went nuts over it, and the original drop sold out in about 6 minutes, which is crazy fast. Sephora is a death sentence, let me tell you, I swear. So we've set the scene, right? Pat came out with this amazing new product. She was hugely hyped. She was working on some really high-end fashion shows at the time, like she has done throughout her whole career. So she was relevant always, and always has been, always will be. She then went on to release Phantom 002 2 months after, which was basically just some like editorial colors and a glossy finish black gel. But again, remembering that some of these were exciting at the time. Like, again, another very artistry focused, like when would you use this other than being a makeup artist, or if you do, editorial makeup on yourself, when would you use this kind of products? And it kind of brought those two aspects together, the editorial versus like mass market makeup. They don't seem separate anymore. A lot of what you get on the mass market is in makeup artist kits and vice versa. That brands can put out more experimental formulas and colors and shades and guarantee that someone's gonna buy it. So they're not wasting money on these more exciting products. And people have picked up makeup as a hobby, so they're gonna buy those foils, they're gonna buy those black gels, you know? So obviously Pat McGrath releasing like raw pigments or things you wouldn't really get outside of like a makeup artist stash was pretty new to the mass market, although brands did it right. So in April of 2016, Pat McGrath Labs launched the Skin Fetish Series 3 in Sephora. Not the foundation, it was a 3-step highlighter. It was definitely more like pro-focused in the way that it actually had a learning curve. People were used to one and done products or things you can just like swipe, you know, on someone. Someone going to Sephora would have to pick it up, went home, tried to use it on their cheeks like a lip balm, and then got a shock when the oil-based balm broke their foundation up because they've just dragged it across their base, right? So it was a learning curve product, but it was a formula that perhaps professionals were used to. So thinking back to 2016 when this came out, a lot of people were still experimenting with new finishes, new formulas, new techniques, both online and now in real life. And naturally, products designed for pro use looked great on camera, but people that did get over any learning curves did end up liking what she came out with, and the brand naturally started to attract bigger investors. So Pat McGrath Labs, the brand, had a few investors between is that the right word? Yeah. Between 2015 and 2018, they had over 88 million in investments. The brand had to lean more into sales than what it might have creativity, because those investors want their money back, right? This is where the mothership palettes came in, the trance lipstick lines and her gel liners. So thinking of products aimed for anyone to use, really more direct at the luxury crowd with the packaging rather than just the people who wanted pro-grade formulations. Now, if Pat McGrath had came out with anything less than the luxury line, I would have been extremely confused, because to me, she is somebody in a very high position that is very well earned. For me, it would be like the King of England coming out with an IKEA plate range. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't quite make sense. So if Pat McGrath was to come out with a drugstore brand, to me, that wouldn't make sense. Because of the height of her industry, she is an iconic person within the industry. If you didn't know her before, she had already succeeded at everything within her career before this brand, right? Before the social media of it all. She was well established well before the existence of social media. So if she was to come out with anything less than what she did, I think it wouldn't have fit, it wouldn't have suited. This was definitely the moment that kind of led to a bit of the soul being sucked out of a brand, and not even from necessarily a quality point of view from the looks of things, rather than her releases being meaningful and purposeful and fueled by actual artistry. They ended up just being nice formulas for people that would pay for them. And let me tell you what, the mothership palettes, beautiful. The lip products, beautiful. I would pay that price for those products. Some of the formulations were so unique, like some things we hadn't seen before, and the color stories were great. They were great. And I really do think that the first releases were like, okay, this is still incredible. Yes, it's a line of products. It's a range of products. We have those investors. We need to get some money back to those investors. But oh my God, what a range of products. Very exciting, very nice. So obviously ignoring some of the cardboard nonsense that had gone on, there's definitely more of a switch to that luxe packaging, right? Like the heavier plastic, the embossing on the products, the name on the product. It definitely gave luxury, it gave high end, and people were willing to pay for it. Even people who maybe weren't like incredible at makeup, but knew who Pat McGrath was, knew that this was, you know, a brand that was worth checking out, were also wanting to pay for it. A question for you all, do you think they peaked in 2019? I think they peaked in 2019. So we're cutting ahead to 2019. Pat McGrath was in Selfridges. She brought out the Skin Fetish Foundation. Pat herself was in Times Magazine, and the brand had gotten unicorn status. And that just means a privately owned business that reaches a value of 1 billion. Yeah, and really, they moved from being a cult classic to a household name. That foundation is one of the best foundations I think I have ever used in my life. Once you get the shade right, I actually went into the counter on Selfridges and had a shade match because I kept buying the shade that wasn't mine. And oh my God, it was so stunning. One of the best foundations for me, definitely worth a price tag. I think if there's something worth investing in, it is your complexion products. Suppose you can't blame the brand for wanting to shift directions, you know, cater to more people, make more money. They are a brand after all, especially when the quality is there. When Pat McGrath Labs started to have problems though was when that quality dipped. The packaging slowly started to get lighter, limited editions were re-released, collabs were just old palettes in new sleeves or stickers, and everything started to feel a little bit samey. The Star Wars palette being a prime example, where it was just the regular palettes with a sticker put on top. Which is like, I mean, everyone was like, it's just a sticker. And I was like, well, what else are they gonna do? I get it though. I get the anger at it. This is definitely an area that I personally had issue with within the line. The quality of the eyeshadows did seem to change slightly to a point where I was like, oh, I don't know what's really happening here. And listen, I don't mind a cardboard palette. I don't mind it, but let's make sure the quality of the products is there. I remember buying one eyeshadow palette that was like a bigger version, and everyone seemed to love it. And I was like, no, this feels different. It doesn't feel right. There's something off about the quality of this product. And then the releases came along, Bridgerton, all this other stuff, the other motherships, and it just seemed to give us this same shade of pinky nude, reddy pinky nude. It's almost like, you know how I keep talking about how people keep releasing the same lip balm products? It was almost like that was happening with the eyeshadow. And pricing didn't seem to change that much either. You were paying like quite a hefty price for a cardboard palette. Like at least like Dior and Chanel still do that plastic. And I mean, I would rather cardboard, it's recyclable, but if you collect, maybe you want plastic, you know? Just a quick note here. I don't think that Pat McGrath Labs necessarily stopped being successful or even stopped having potential to be successful. I think it's more that creativity is expensive to upkeep. And even more so when it doesn't resonate with everyone. You know what I mean? I mean, they were obviously successful. You can't say that a brand that made 1 billion isn't successful. You know what I loved about them is that like, they didn't resonate with everyone, but that was such a great point to the brand. You were creating something that was so unique and different. Unfortunately though, when ideas don't resonate, they don't scale. So pair that with a price point that slowly gets harder to justify, and you've pretty much got a train wreck, to be honest, because the product releases all started feeling, like I said, the same. And the passion for the products, it was lost and people just didn't care. And people weren't feeling like, oh, I need to buy this limited edition, I need to buy this product. It went from feeling special and innovative to predictable. For a brand that built itself on actual innovation and artistry that people were excited to buy, that really mattered to the people that were coming back to buy from the brand. And then we had some really strange collabs like the Candy Crush one. Bridgerton was great. I think that was a really good mix, but it would have been nice to see some difference in things. You know what I mean? All the color palettes just got really samey. I can't stress that enough. It was same. And let's think about, I mean, back to them working with brands like Sephora, Selfridges here in the UK. When, as a business, you get into a contract to sell with them, there are certain targets you have to hit. So thinking things like new releases, it's not necessarily a rule, but if a brand doesn't have new, interesting, something people want to buy all the time, they lose shelf space for newer releases because they sell better. And when you have private investors, that really matters. If you have an empty shelf there and they run out of stock to put out, you get a fine. So in order to keep being profitable, have a good relationship with retailers and not be hit with fines, you need a lot of product being released, and often. So when you're a brand that has to have a lot of releases for these contracts, to keep up with these contracts, when you're trying to stay in a luxury market with packaging, when you have complex formulas on top of having to make a lot of product, it becomes really expensive and margins are small. When your margins are that tight, it can be a slippery slope if something goes wrong. So when all these releases just weren't generating sales and they were having to constantly release product, this is probably the reason for the Candy Crush palette. Using popular IPs to guarantee some sales, they were really starting to lose out on profits, like Colourpop do. They'll partner with anyone. Valuations that were made when they were at their peak didn't make sense anymore. And because of this, they would have been losing investors. Over the past couple of years, Pat McGrath Labs has had a few rounds of quiet layoffs. In 2024 and 2025, they got rid of executives and other highly paid management because they were getting kind of close to a 200 million value rather than their original 1 billion. And again, just to be clear with this, I'm 100% not getting at Pat herself or even any of her previous or current staff members. This is just what happens when a brand that was built on artistry and natural innovation is forced to run like a multi-billion-dollar umbrella. You know what I mean? Now, obviously something has to eventually give in this situation. You've got little to no money, you're stuck in contracts, you have deadlines, you have stock problems to deal with, and you're on limited staff. The only thing they had left to do is file for Chapter 11. So everyone over on TikTok, Instagram, and social media who is acting like this is the end of Pat McGrath is wrong. I mean, it could be, but the reason they have filed is because a Chapter 11 is basically just a legal process a business can go down to protect themselves. It gives them time to do things like renegotiate contracts, find sources of money to deal with debt, come up with new brand strategies, and find a way to continue being a brand, but more sustainably to their money. Now listen, we know the internet loves devastation. And, you know, for some reason, there seems to be this thing which I completely disagree with, that people are like, oh, Pat McGrath is closing because they're too expensive because of it. No, luxury brands exist. And if anyone deserves that price point, if anybody knows what they're talking about with makeup, it is Dame Pat McGrath. She knows her stuff. She is always going to be booked, busy, blessed. She is a well-respected person. It's not because the brand were too expensive. It's because, in my mind, it lost its creativity. We know people will pay money for makeup. We know that if it is good enough and exciting enough. So while everyone in line is waiting for Pat McGrath Labs to close down forever and ever, that probably isn't what will happen at all. They will likely move things around until they can pay their debts off. Try and get some more investors on board with some safe launches and probably move on to their own website rather than retailers. But don't expect any fun campaigns, expensive people in shoots, or like fancy packaging. I honestly think they're going to go down a similar route to Charlotte Tilbury, where they paint themselves as a classic brand, stay expensive, and get that demographic of people willing to pay for their products until they have just enough money to pump into like a profitable celebrity or collectible trendy collection so that the brand gets back to being more relevant again, right? I honestly would be really, really sad to see this brand go. I have not purchased anything from them for years and years and years. And can I say something? This is complete speculation, because I find it hard to believe that some of the new releases are something that Pat McGrath herself would have come up with. I feel like it got too like, well, let's make money, which you want to make money, but from the wrong people. I think it went from passion project to being like, oh, we kind of have to do this to do this. Maybe they were trying to make palettes more wearable, in quotes, wearable. And I just couldn't imagine that some of this stuff had come from someone so creative in terms of being able to do whatever you want creativity wise. You know what I mean? And yes, like things like the Louis Vuitton collection, for example, where you have to stick in certain guidelines of the brand and their branding and what they do. That's what creative director does. They understand the brand and their branding and then make a brand that is cohesive with their branding, right? But this is her own brand, her own company. She can do whatever she likes with this, unless you have investors that need some more money and you need to sell and make sales. So I would love to see this brand come back in a way that's true to the original reason the brand started. Let's take Urban Decay, for example. What does everyone want from Urban Decay right now? Excitement. What are they not giving? Excitement. It does come to a point where perhaps if you listen to the people who are going to buy your product, you might be able to make something that people will buy. I really, really do hope Pat McGrath Labs stays around. And, you know, even if they stick to the same, you know, the mothership stuff, the gold, the black, beautiful. Love it. Luxury. When I think of Pat McGrath, I think high-end luxury. In my mind, Pat McGrath is in the most expensive penthouse in London, looking over her kingdom, you know? That's what I think when I think of Pat McGrath. She goes out and she effortlessly does the best makeup ever because she's so skilled, and everyone, you know, everyone claps, and you know, that's me, that's my mind, that's who Pat McGrath is. So stick to that high end, stick to that luxury, because in my mind, that's who she is. But let's make stuff people want. Listen, maybe some umbrella will buy them out. Let's pray to God it's not Estee Lauder, because that is a death sentence. But would it also be great to have that backing, that money, to be able to release something that they truly want to, create something that they truly care about? And I think that's what it is for me, why I never bought anything kind of new, is because it felt like the brand didn't care. And I'm not talking about Pat McGrath herself, because I'm sure she's not the only person that had everything to say about this. I'm sure people were like, we kind of have to do this. In my mind, that's what's happening. I would like to see stuff that I think Pat McGrath would like. I think that's it. I hope that kind of helped you get up to speed on the situation. What are your final thoughts here? Is there anything you would like to say to the brand themselves? I also want to stress again, none of this is criticism towards Pat McGrath herself, more so to the industry, the beauty industry, and the way it works. What are your predictions for this brand going forward? How do you think it's going to work out? What kind of direction do you think they're going to go in? I would love to know your opinions. I would love to know what you think of the brand. I am still waiting for that lip gloss that I ordered a while back and still haven't got. But it's fine, it's fine. I don't need it, it's fine. You're going through some stuff, it's fine. Again, let me know your opinions down below, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.